Hi, I'm Lisa Logan, your host of Parents of Patriots. What do school reform, election reform, and the response to the COVID-19 pandemic have in common? What if I told you that there were three leftist nonprofits driving them all with the purpose of fundamentally transforming our country? In today's video, I'll show you how our education system and our election system are simultaneously being attacked from the inside out. There is one leftist nonprofit driving critical race theory into U.S. and Utah schools. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, which is influencing states' K-20 education systems and state COVID protocols, as well as driving ranked choice voting reforms at the state, county, and city levels. CASEL was co-founded and is chaired by progressive political activist Tim Shriver. Shriver is part of the Kennedy dynasty through his mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and is best known for his leadership at the Special Olympics. Shriver heads various liberty-destroying nonprofits. Three of Shriver's nonprofits are CASEL, the COVID Collaborative, and Unite. These groups work hand in glove to restructure the United States around critical race theory. So what does CASEL do, and how have they fundamentally transformed the purpose of K-20 education? I covered CASEL extensively in Sinister SEL 3, but in a nutshell, they've been lobbying since 1994 to reshape the entire U.S. education system around behavioral science. CASEL leaders work with the Obama administration to pass the 2015 Every Student Succeeds Act, which makes it mandatory for states receiving federal money to report back to the government on their students' social and emotional health, which then had to be taught, quantified, and collected as data. Social emotional learning is now embedded in state standards, curriculum, and assessments, and teachers have to undergo training on how to implement instruction in this subject area in the classroom. CASEL also sets the 5 core competencies or standards of social and emotional learning by which all SEL curricula brought into schools are evaluated against and rated by. CASEL, with a myriad of nonprofit and big funding partners, has changed the very purpose of education away from measuring school accountability by tracking students' academic skills through grades to instead tracking and prioritizing social and emotional skills as essential competencies for college and career readiness. It must be understood that SEL curricula showing up in schools across the nation is just part and parcel of larger systemic reforms happening in education as a result of CASEL's and their funding partners' influence. This is a problem because in 2020, CASEL came out with a new definition of SEL called Transformative Social and Emotional Learning. This changed the whole goal of these programs from helping children to manage their emotions and develop healthy relationships to creating social justice activists for particular causes and ideologies. Black liberation theology and LGBTQIA+ rights are at the core of this vision. This new form of social emotional learning is the teaching pedagogy for critical race theory and also queer theory. The terms are therefore interchangeable. Social now equals collective thought versus building healthy relationships that respect individual differences. Emotional now means radical activism for collective causes. Empathy and perspective taking means you have to do something, or in their words, dismantle the systems that are allegedly set up to oppress particular groups of people. A recent CASEL paper in The Educational Psychologist, funded by Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, explains how CASEL sees the potential of transformative social emotional learning to effectively address issues such as power, privilege, prejudice, discrimination, social justice, empowerment, and self-determination. CASEL says that social emotional learning should be, quote, leveraged in the service of equity for a range of minoritized people within the U.S. social system. And they also assert that, quote, racialized oppression was foundational to the establishment of the United States and persists as a vexing, unresolved cluster of problems that youth need to rise up and fight against. CASEL's vice board chair is University of Illinois psychology professor Roger Weisberg. Weisberg became the Nova Foundation's endowed chair in social emotional learning in 2011. The Nova Foundation is a left-wing nonprofit founded by billionaire Peter Buffett that funds not only CASEL, but Black Lives Matter and the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project, as well as the LGBTQIA+ identity movement, including massive funding to advance transgender rights. CASEL's chair, Tim Shriver, hides behind a veneer of legitimacy at the Special Olympics, but then uses the message of inclusion for special needs kids as both CASEL's shield and sword. If we are to be truly inclusive, according to CASEL, America's youth must advocate for racial and sexual minorities that are being oppressed by white middle-class men and enslaved by a Christian heteronormative patriarchy. CASEL drives the work of the U.S. Department of Education and multiple education nonprofits that direct the entire system of education at the state level. This includes the following organizations, although this is not an exhaustive list. The NEA, PTA, and state education organizations like the UTA all support CASEL's new definition of social-emotional learning. This explains why equity committees and whole child initiatives have popped up in almost every school district in every state across the nation. Same goes for the national program, Portrait of a Graduate, that's been adopted in many states with the help of CASEL's partner KnowledgeWorks. I cover this extensively in the Transformation of Education, Part 1, that this is in fact part of a larger global agenda coming down from UN agencies to create global competencies toward global citizenship education. P21, which is an organization that works with Battelle for Kids that created Portrait of a Graduate, and CASEL, are both mentioned in this document as working to take a systems approach to 21CS. This is an international education focus from UN agencies to target skills needed to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4. In order to hide these objectives from states' education and government leaders, CASEL uses two truths and a lie. It's happened in my own state of Utah. Governor Spencer Cox's wife, Abby Cox, has a policy agenda that includes CASEL's vision for social-emotional learning. Her Show Up initiative has 4 objectives: advance social-emotional learning, expand Special Olympics, support foster families, and create service opportunities. And she even invited Tim Shriver to be on her advisory board. While the state rallies around the inclusion of special needs kids and helping children whose mental health has truly been affected by the pandemic, all areas we can agree need support, the lie of critical race theory through social-emotional learning begins to creep in behind the scenes of state education policy. Many well-respected Utahns that are advancing CASEL's vision for K-20 curriculum have no idea about their nefarious agenda. In addition, Governor Gary Herbert's former education advisor, Tammy Pfeiffer, who led the way in getting Utah into a collaborating states initiative with CASEL to connect education and workforce policy through a social-emotional learning lens, is now on the board of Tim Shriver's nonprofits, the COVID Collaborative and Unite. These two organizations, along with CASEL, work together to transform our education system and election systems simultaneously. In a recent interview, Pfeiffer explained Tim Shriver's vision for uniting the country around nonpartisan objectives. The problem is, Shriver's objectives are not nonpartisan at all. They are CASEL's Marxist political objectives. The COVID Collaborative describes itself as a, quote, bipartisan, comprehensive team of experts, leaders, and institutions in health, education, and the economy, representing the diversity of the country, end quote. The COVID Collaborative's national board is devising and marketing COVID policy for states and K-20 schools. They sell CASEL's social-emotional learning as the best way to help teachers and students through the COVID crisis and really any crises to come. The COVID Collaborative's controlled COVID protocols have been used to push teachers and students into online learning, and they ensure that the collaborative can control school responses to any future crises. The COVID Collaborative runs initiatives like the nationwide Mask Up initiative and media campaigns for school COVID contact tracing and testing, as well as vaccine policy and distribution. Former U.S. presidents, the taxpayer-funded Ad Council, the PAC-5 commissioners, the Pope, and many more leaders have been enlisted in the COVID Collaborative's campaigns. 5 former U.S. education secretaries are part of the COVID Collaborative, and they are pushing for an online education for students. Groups associated with the COVID Collaborative have goals of using online education to introduce Action Civics curriculum that will reshape American values around social justice. Action Civics would not just be contained to civics class, however, but be designed to weave throughout all school curriculum subjects. It's important to note that John Bridgeland, co-founder and CEO of COVID Collaborative, is also the co-founder and CEO of the same org, Civic LLC, mentioned in the Collaborating States Initiative Agreement with CASEL, which is chaired by his buddy, Tim Shriver. Bridgeland is also the vice chair of Tim Shriver's organization, Unite. This sounds a lot like a case of one hand washing the other. One of the leading radical curriculum companies behind Action Civics is iCivics, founded with the help of former progressive Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. iCivics' online curriculum is filled with critical race theory propaganda, and iCivics works with other groups that teach the tenets of critical race theory, like Generation Citizen. Along with Facebook and Google, iCivics supports the national #TrustedInfo campaign to help state education leaders counter election disinformation. Tim Shriver's Unite is a nonprofit that uses the tactics of social-emotional learning to bring state leaders together from both sides of the aisle to end partisan bickering and focus on the issues that we can all agree on. Then, Unite's networks market the messages that we're all supposed to agree on. Unite has multiple nonprofit partners. One of its partners, Act Now, tells us that we must, quote, imagine an America free from bias, misuse of force, and systemic racism, end quote. The belief that America is systemically racist is a talking point of those that espouse critical race theory. It's no coincidence that these organizations coming into states around the country bring in ranked choice voting reforms with them. 23 of my own state of Utah cities have joined in, including the one I live in, and many more in the nation. On July 19, 2021, Tim Shriver and his COVID collaborative and Unite partner, John Bridgeland, published an article in The Hill entitled A Fresh Start, Let's Heal America's Divisions Before Her 250th Birthday. There, Shriver and Bridgeland laid out a thinly veiled plan to unite Americans around a new political system. They not only point Americans to the aforementioned radical civics curriculum company iCivics as a leader in civic education and renewal, they also point Americans to Represent Us, which is a leading leftist nonprofit behind ranked choice voting. Both Represent Us and Unite are partners of the national lobby behind ranked choice voting, Fair Vote. Fair Vote has been working for decades to replace the U.S. representative republic with a direct democracy, so the masses can be manipulated to vote for leftist causes, while the conservative Christian minority in less populated regions of states are silenced into weak submission. Fair Vote says, quote, our broad vision is that all elections in the United States are held with ranked choice voting, and that winner-take-all congressional elections are replaced with proportional representation. Fair Vote's objective is to replace America's representative republic with a national popular vote. This requires changes to the Electoral College that defeat its protections. Ranked choice voting is at its simplest form a way to centralize vote counting and to obfuscate the final results through convoluted and statistically manipulatable vote tallying methods. In this way, cities are losing control over their local elections. As I just mentioned, 23 Utah cities have embraced ranked choice voting, and as has happened in other states and cities, now its advocates are calling on Utah to eliminate partisan primaries. Hopefully now you see that CASEL, the COVID Collaborative, and Unite have 1. Seized control over the entire direction and purpose of the education system at the state and federal level, 2. Have been directing Utah's and other states' COVID response, and 3. Have been taking control over state and local elections with their partner, Fair Vote. State and local leaders must understand that structural education and joint election reforms are threatening families' values and political freedoms, not only in Utah but across the nation. Local education and election leaders would do well to draft a plan to forego federal education funding and shore up state and local election systems. We must fight back. Our children and grandchildren need to know how much we care about their future liberties. We cannot allow our children to be propagandized against their parents and the core values that preserve our great nation. There is no greater cause. Don't forget to like this video, to subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon so you know when I post new content. I'll see you next time.